the For I Will Be With You podcast for the 22nd week of the year from May 27th to June 2nd, covering Exodus 32:17 to Exodus 37:17. And before I start, just a real quick commercial to remind you that you can actually get a copy of this book, For I Will Be With You, at foriwillbewithyou.com. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, we'd love to have your support. So in Exodus 32:17, we have Joshua and Moses up on Mount Sinai, and they're returning to the camp of the Israelites. Moses has with him the 10 Commandments engraved on stone tablets. It says in Exodus 32:17, Joshua heard the sound of the people in its shouting, and he said to Moses, "The sound of battle is in the camp." Moses didn't know that the Israelites had made a golden calf when he descended with the 10 Commandments, but he heard the noise made by the wild dancing and celebration going on in front of the idol. And of course, if you want to know what that looked like, you can always watch the movie The 10 Commandments. They depict it very colorfully in the movie. So what's interesting is to Joshua, though, who's his helper, it was the sound of battle. So what was it? Was it celebration or battle? Well, maybe it was both. And there's sort of a blurring of boundary between celebration and strife that defines what was going on in the Israelite camp. Yes, the Israelites were celebrating their new, quote, God, but they were also, this is an interpretation, at least some of them were struggling with it. It was a dissonant experience. They knew better. They had just sworn literally a few weeks earlier to follow one true God. So they knew what they were doing was wrong. I mean, they specifically said they weren't going to follow idols, and here they were. But they couldn't stop themselves. And this is, as I think a lot of us know, what happens in a relapse. We know what we're doing is bad for us. It's not the right thing to be doing, but we're fighting with it. It's like a battle, and maybe it's a battle that we lose sometimes. And I think that the solution in these kind of situations is often right in front of us, as it was in the case of the golden calf, which is that they were following a false god. And there is one true God that will help us win this battle and stay sober. Exodus 35:1, this is in the aftermath of the golden calf, says, Moses assembled the entire assembly of the children of Israel and said to them, "These are the things that God commanded to do them." So, one little note first, here's one man who's in his 80s talking to 3 million people, and they can all hear him. It's one of the miracles of the Bible. Somehow Moses' voice was heard. Now, what are these things that God is commanding the Israelites to do? There are two things referenced here, according to the commentators. One is to observe the Sabbath, and the other is to donate the materials and the money to build the tabernacle. So Moses is saying, these are the things that God commanded to do them. Now, we have seemingly superfluous words here, to do them. Why do we need to say to do them? We are being commanded to do them. Doing them is implied in, being commanded to do them is implied in the word commanded. So in going under the principle that there are no wasted words in the Torah, we are going to offer an interpretation. And the extra wording, according to the commentators, the extra words suggest that the Israelites needed to atone for the sin of the golden calf by building the tabernacle and observing the Sabbath. These were two things they could do, two actions they could take to atone for this sin. And this is a concept that we have in recovery too, which is if you do something wrong, take action to correct the problem. Don't just think about it, or don't say you're going to do it and then not do it, or say you're going to do it at some unspecified future date and then you forget. You have to make amends, do whatever it is you're supposed to do to make up for whatever you did. Because, as we know in recovery, it's only through action that wrongs are righted. And in this story, the golden calf was really, could think of it as a spiritually damaging event. So the Israelites needed a spiritual repair, spiritual atonement to make themselves ready in the wilderness to survive and then to enter the land of Israel. In recovery, positive spiritual action is the source of repair for our damaged selves. Exodus 35:2, Moses continues, says, "On 6 days work may be done, but the seventh day shall be holy for you, a day of complete rest for God." So God is instructing the Israelites through Moses to observe the Sabbath right after the commandment to contribute the materials for building the tabernacle. These two instructions go together. The Sabbath and the tabernacle were two of the great pillars of Jewish religion. We don't have a tabernacle anymore, but we still have the Sabbath. And just maybe an interesting side note, in the Jewish faith, the Sabbath, the prayer service on the Sabbath is structured to replicate the offerings that were done in the tabernacle. There's different prayers that you say that are sort of mirrored to physical actions that were taken when the tabernacle and the temple actually stood. So it's kind of a reminder of that. But putting these two commandments together, Sabbath and tabernacle together, can reveal an important spiritual concept for us that we can use in recovery, which is that, yes, the tabernacle was essential for Jewish worship, but the Sabbath overrules it. The Sabbath is so important, it overrules the mandate to build the tabernacle. You cannot work on the tabernacle on Sabbath. In fact, and not just something that may help you understand this concept, observant religious Jews who observe the Sabbath, the Jewish Sabbath, don't do certain things. They don't write, they don't spend money, they don't do carpentry, they don't use electricity. All of the 39 actions that are forbidden on the Jewish Sabbath are the 39 types of work that were used to build the tabernacle as described in the Bible. So that's where we get it from, and that's a reminder that even though the tabernacle is 100% essential for observing God for the Israelites in the wilderness and in Jerusalem in the temple, the Sabbath overrules it. You may not work on building the tabernacle on the Sabbath. And in recovery, what I like to connect this with is a concept that people in recovery need a sort of a Sabbath, a quiet time, a quiet space away from the day-to-day grind. This is, whether you're religious or not, I think this is helpful in recovery or just in general. You need some quiet space in your life when you're away from business, from interactive screens, from telephones, TV, anything that can distract you from being calm and serene. I think it's really important. And most people who are have good recovery have some time structure around this, where it's like a meditative time, a time for prayer, even if it's a minute or two a day, just something to quiet yourself down and get your head quiet, to focus on your recovery and your serenity for the day, to get some conscious contact with God going. Exodus 35:21 describes the giving of gifts and the construction of the tabernacle. It says 35:21 says, "Every man whose heart inspired him came." It says many people helped to build the tabernacle under the guidance of Bezalel. As we learned earlier, Bezalel was this 13-year-old boy who miraculously was able to become this genius master craftsman and artisan who could build this fantastic structure in the middle of nowhere. And it says here that many people came to help him. And you should remember that these people who came to help him had all just really a couple of months earlier had been slaves and who had been subjected to demeaning menial labor. And most likely none of them really had any knowledge of the crafts needed to do the gold and silver work and weaving and dyeing of leather and all these things and skins and all this elaborate work that had to be done to build a tabernacle. So how did so many people learn these skills so quickly? So one of the commentators, who's known as Maimonides, he has an answer. According to Maimonides, any Jew who had the capacity to be inspired to volunteer for building the tabernacle miraculously got the ability to do the work. So if you wanted to say, I want to do it, I'm volunteering, then somehow God would provide you with the knowledge of how to craft silver and gold and stone and whatever else was used in the tabernacle. In recovery, we have the same idea. I've seen this many, many times. If we open ourselves to inspiration, to being ready to change ourselves, God will give us the skills to get the work done. And this is something that comes up in these steps in AA that are sort of in between steps, like becoming ready, making a list. But it's a step before the step. If you can be open to inspiration, to be ready to change yourself, God will give you the skills to get the work done. And in this way, it's sort of like the Israelites, we all have the potential to be master craftsmen of the inner self. We have to open ourselves up for inspiration. Exodus 35:22 continues saying, "The men came with the women, everyone whose heart motivated him brought bracelets, nose rings, body ornaments." So here the Israelites are donating their jewelry, their gold and silver jewelry, for the tabernacle. Maimonides points out that with the women, this phrase, with the women, it's a tribute to the women. They rushed forward to donate their precious jewels. They ran toward the opportunity to do an important commandment from God. And this can teach us something that's essential to recovery. When we are in recovery, we need to take action sooner rather than later. We need to be in action today. As the saying goes in AA, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, right? There is only today. We need to hurry up and rush to do what we need to do for our own recovery and that of others. We need to do it today, not tomorrow. It's inspiring to see this process at work. So, for example, there are people you can see at AA meetings, and sometimes you don't know what people do outside of the meeting, but sometimes you do know. And I can tell you, for example, that in Los Angeles, there are people in meetings who are running multi-billion-dollar companies and television networks and stuff, and you know who they are because you see their picture in the paper and they're sitting there, and then you see them taking a few extra minutes after the meeting to listen to somebody talk, and you're thinking, wow, this is a guy who probably, if you could get an appointment with him outside of this meeting, it would take 6 weeks to get in to see him, and it's hard to reach and everything, blah, blah, blah. But here he's taking extra time out of his day to listen to someone. And that's what we're talking about. Take action today. Be available. Don't wait. Exodus 37:10 says, "He made the table of acacia wood." Now, what's happening here is the Bible's describing the specific parts of the tabernacle in detail. In this case, Bezalel is making the table. There was a table outside the part of the tabernacle that was used for keeping bread. They would bake, the priests would bake loaves of bread called the showbreads that were placed on it during the Sabbath and left there all week. And then I think they would be eaten the following Sabbath. And God made a minor miracle that the bread would not be stale after sitting outside for a week. Now, this table didn't really look like a table. The pictures I've seen of it look more like a set of shelves, but there's interpretations of what it looked like. And the loaves of bread had a very unusual shape. It's very interesting stuff, if you're interested in that kind of detail. But I want to focus on this idea of the bread not going stale, despite sitting outside for a week. And I relate this to recovery in that I've seen this, I've seen it with myself, I also have seen this with many other people, that there is an inner self that comes out after a period of addiction. And to me, it's like this bread that doesn't go stale. Like most a lot of people, if you left them outside in the street for 6 months, the way some people in recovery have been, that you'd figure that's really it. This person's kind of finished, right? They're going to go stale, so to speak. But they don't. I mean, there's something inside them when they come back to life in recovery. They're fresh, and it's really fascinating and inspiring to see that that the core of their self is not stale. It was there the whole time. It was ready for holiness, ready to be brought back to life. One other thought on this verse, there's a question that comes up, which is, where did the Israelites get this acacia wood in the middle of the desert? I mean, there may have been some trees growing in the wilderness of Sinai, but probably not a lot. And God specifically wanted them to use this kind of wood. So where did it come from? And one answer is that Jacob had planted these trees hundreds of years earlier, because Jacob was a prophet and he foresaw the Exodus. He knew, like the prophets like Jacob and Isaac and Abraham, they understood it prophetically what was going to happen. They may not have known exactly the details, but they knew Israelites are going to be enslaved, they're going to be freed, and they're going to be commanded to make something out of acacia wood. So he planted the trees. And the trees were ready for the Israelites when they left Egypt. And this is, I think, kind of a metaphor for the AA program. It's like a tree planted by someone many years before you showed up, but it's ready for you when you need it. And if you think about the early AA pioneers who created the structure the structure of the meeting, the books, the steps, all that incredible work that was done to prepare this institution for the drunks of tomorrow, right? That's, for lack of a better term. And, when you walk into an AA meeting in 2016, 81 years after the AA was founded, you're really harvesting this acacia tree, so to speak, that was planted by Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob and all the early pioneers of AA. Exodus 37:17 says he made the menorah of pure gold. So the menorah, which was this 6-branched candelabra that you've probably seen pictures of, and similar to what's used on the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, although those have 8 branches. The menorah in the tabernacle had 6 branches, 3 on either side of a central lamp. So there was one sort of lamp in the middle and 3 on each side. This way they all lit up together. And what the commentators say is that the light sort of was directed towards the center candle, six beams of light aiming at a central light. And there are many interpretations of what this means. Like, one interpretation is that the 6 branches are the 6 days of the week, and the central light is the Sabbath. And there's many different interpretations like this. One way we can think about it in recovery is that each individual, look at it as a group of people, like 6 spiritual lights shine towards God. And or you can think of it as that when we get together in a group, like an AA meeting, our individual spiritual lights combine to a greater whole. And when we go to a meeting and share and listen to people, we all become better. We all improve ourselves as a group, and we all light each other up. We lead each other out of darkness like these lamps. So another way to look at it is the opposite, which is that the light radiates outwards, which of course it does. If you light a candle, the light goes away from it. We too can radiate the sort of light of recovery out into the world of addiction. And keeping with the idea of attraction, not promotion, we're able to shine our light, our light of recovery, through personal example.
You've been listening to the For I Will Be With You podcast. Daily reflections on recovery from the Bible. www.foriwillbewithyou.com.